Hello and welcome to Data Ki Baat. Sharing is caring, and it is not different when you are talking about data. Data, it is important to really collect the data, but it is also very important to really share it so that it can be used for public good, social good, country good, or for that matter, your organization purposes. So how about digging it more in detail in the fifth series of non-personal data governance report that of India has published, and I have been running this campaign to talk about each and every chapter, and then sharing my thoughts about how, basically, my interpretation about the report. Not necessarily I am trying to really read that out, but this is my take on how I feel about the report. So this is very common topic. Everybody might have heard about data sharing, but how this reports takes that in the context of the country. Remember, we are talking about a country with lot of population, lot of different bodies working together, public, private, NGOs, entrepreneurs, startups, and all those ecosystems. And then imagine how to leverage the data assets, data gold mine that we have in a way that it is not basically creating any conflict of interest. At the same time, there is a good enough data democratization in place, considering the governance and compliance needs also at the same time taken care. So without any further delay, I'll bring up and brief that where we are landing with this report. So first we started with the data trends, where we spoke about various impact of data, what kind of a opportunity, what kind of a threat with the data, because when there is a data, it is like both ways. It's not only the opportunities, but it also creates threats like security, compliance. So data trends. Then we talked about non-personal data ecosystem. What are the various definition? What are the different categorization? And then also compared non-personal versus personal data. And then we also spoke about various roles like data trustee, trust, data principal, and then data custodian. Then we talked about ownership and various duties and rights, legal basis. So it's all about really knowing your data duties and data rights. Then finally, we talked about data businesses. It is a new category really envisioned by Government of India about how anyone, be it a small organization or an individual or entrepreneur or a startup, if they are using data more than a certain threshold, they should be probably termed as a data business. And then there has to be a process to help them register. There has to be a process to monitor what kind of a data is being used. There has to be a way for them to be able to report that the data uses over time. And then if they're adding anything new as well, suppose they started the business with certain data sets in mind, but then over the time, if they have added anything else, then that also needs to be reported. In this episode, I am going to talk about data sharing. And as I said, right, sharing is caring, but when it comes to data, it is not really easy. It's going to be complicated because it requires a lot of various different considerations based upon what kind of a data we are talking about when it comes to sharing, right? So the whole idea is that what are the different control and governance that we can put so that public data, private data, and the community data can be freely shared with defined purposes, so that this can be used for improving the policies, for example, creating some kind of a data product or services, which in turns benefit the individual or organization and the countryman as well. So the provision for controlled access to private, public, and community data. I'm reading it out really literally for a individual and organization for defined purposes. So we will talk about the different purposes, and we will also talk about different mechanism in which the data must be shared, and then it also talks about what kind of right governance and control to really safeguard the interest of the parties involved. In this case, the data principal, the subject whose data is at stake or whose data we are talking about. So with that, I'm moving on to the next slide, which talks about really the need of. So the whole idea is that when you want to share, before that, there has to be a way that that there has to be a process in place. As I call it, right? There has to be a method in the madness that we are trying. So in this case also, right, there has to be a well-oiled mechanism for somebody. In this case, various parties involved, like government, non-government, community, trust or startup. There has to be a way to request for the information, and then there has to be a way to fulfill those information, and this all process should work very seamlessly, and the fulfillment has to happen as needed based upon the right evaluation, right due diligence. So for that, there has to be there is a process put in place. So once we do that, the whole idea and whole thought process of the report is that once we kind of establish this streamlined process, it would help people to the companies to really use the data for various innovation need, digital transformation, digital economy, and all of those things that we really need of time. So with that, there are certain proposal and purposes that has been defined, that who and why they have to tell that why, who is requesting, and then why they are requesting, and then there must be a way to that. How do I now start sharing that? So under what condition it is being requested, and then how do I share? That is what is defined in this chapter of the non-personal data governance report by the expert committee. So let's move on to the various purposes. So basically, it is country comes first. So for any need, like think about a current pandemic situation, and if the reason and purpose is for that need, that we want to analyze certain data sets to really take some decision in terms of how do we handle this situation, or some natural calamity, some risk at the country level. If those kind of a situation is there, then this that could be a viable or valid purposes. Then there is something called core public interest. So in the interest of public, if we are if there has been a data request, then that also need to be fulfilled, and it comes under the valid purposes. And then finally the economical purposes, because it's ultimately drilled down to how this data, if the data can be used for boosting certain sector, creating employment, or amending some existing policies and processes that kind of give the economical boost to the certain industry or certain segment, then those purpose should be regarded and kind of supported as a valid purpose for the request of data. Now, moving on to the next slide is how this whole request and then fulfillment has to be processed. So I came across this key term over there, and I specifically wanted to highlight, and it's very much relevant here as well, right? How the ecosystem itself has to build within, so that it encourages those kind of collaboration. So there is a term in the report which is probably not new to me and not to everybody else as well, the data spaces. It's basically a concept of creating some kind of a community or a space dedicated for promoting those data specific research, encouraging various parties involved into the ecosystem to collaborate, like government, non-government, startup, universities, labs, and all of those. So once we kind of create that kind of a ecosystem, basically what it would help is that it will basically help us innovate with the data, make the data to the right use, and make people aware of various ways in which they can tackle certain problem with the help of data. So it also recommends that since we are talking about, and we are talking about a big country here, and various sectors, and so the whole idea was that we have to be put domain specific spaces, like for manufacturing and just agriculture. So those kind of bucketization of the spaces, but at the same time there has to be some synergy between all of those various domain to collaborate and communicate and share within. Also is something that I thought I did not see that how that would happen. That suppose if I'm creating a agriculture domain related space, and then manufacturing domain related space, and then say technological or hardware or software related spaces, then how this three entity or three specific domain talks to each other and then exchange information. Because if they start working in isolation, then it is as good as what they are doing currently, or as good as what we are probably doing now, when people are working in silos and there is no exchange of information or sharing of the information. So how do we make that kind of a collaboration happen? I did not find anywhere mentioned, but I'm hoping that that could be something that we have to think, that if you create some space or a innovation lab or maybe a garage, then there has to be a way for them to also coexist and then talk to each other, and then not just work in isolation. So that's something that I thought I will specifically highlight, data spaces. So that's a good term. We also talked about data businesses in last episode. It also recommends that instead of really looking at the report and then waiting for it to be formalized, again, it's my take personally. It basically says that how about looking at the report in a condition that it is, and then imagine that as if the rule or the regulation is already there, then what would we do? So the whole idea is that not to wait. Why can't we just take whatever we are able to learn from the report and see if we can implement at a very small level? So take example of a hospital, healthcare. It basically is the example also given in the report. Then why can't the healthcare sector can start looking at this and see if it can implement whatever is mentioned as a kind of a proposal in this report, and probably become a early adopter. Again, there is a legality, there is a it has to be really a rule before somebody can use it. But what I'm trying to say is that there is no harm in learning from that report rather than waiting for certain things, because it's not that the report is outrightly going to change drastically. It will be amended. There may be some good suggestion coming from various organization or expert around the world or in India to probably amend what is being proposed, but it might just not change drastically in a altogether different way. So how about looking at that report now and trying to implement in a small way and see that how and what we can learn from this. That would basically help us clearly vet the whole proposal in reality, in a real time, as like a proof of concept, and then also suggest and give feedback. So that feedback loop should probably learn and feedback loop should probably help this. It's like it gets matured over time, and then we have definitely a next step to extend it to the various other sectors as well. So that could be one of the thing that I kind of read between the line, where it was proposed that how about the POC on a healthcare sector. But I'm kind of extending it and saying that why not any other sector as well? Why not a school or a university? Why can't they look at this and start seeing that, hey, are they ready? What are the things that they can probably do immediately? Imagine and thinking that the regulation is already put in place. I'm just trying to create that urgency for people to really go look at it and adopt, and not wait for the last minute to start looking at it. Same is with the personal data protection bill. I've been telling that in 2018, when it was like a first released, the draft version, that why to wait for 2019 or 2020 or next year to really have that rule followed. But why not we can evaluate, start looking at our checklist, thinking that, hey, if this comes, I'm ready. If this comes, I'm ready. All of those, and then finally, when it is really there, read it again and then kind of refine. So that way, you will be ahead in the game. You will be basically, probably an early adopter, and you'll be compliant. So That's my personal suggestion and take on how I would approach if I have to look at both these regulations, personal data protection bill as well as non-personal data governance report. Okay, now coming back to the mechanism of how this should be mobilized. So for data to be shared, we have to have a requester, we have to have a request coming in, and then it has to be evaluated, looked at various purposes it complies, or if it is abiding by those proposed rules in the report, and then it should be fulfilled. So there has to be a requester, there has to be a request process, and there has to be a evaluation process before it could be shared, and then finally it should be shared. And if it is rejected, then there has to be a way to tell them that why it is rejected, why we cannot fulfill the data sharing request, and then or for otherwise that okay, why it should be still shared despite it is getting rejected, because there is a lot of social value and then country level benefits that we can see if this data is being shared, and then somebody comes up with some amazing idea or services that start benefiting economically. So for that we have to look at the open government data policy. We have a lot of data, but it has to be revisited that what is the state of that initiative. Again, I keep referring to that open government data portal. That could be one of the space, but I think there is a lot that need to be done over there as well, because some data is like old, maybe a last couple of years back it was updated. There is no latest data set available for certain domains as well. That's my personal observation. I looked at that. So that has to be up to date for encouraging the data use basically. So you're keeping the data, but if somebody is not using it, that means maybe it is not latest or not probably reliable in this case, data quality and all of those things, right? And then it also talks about how the proposed rule can be applicable horizontally across the participant or ecosystem. So government, private sector, all of those, right? And then the private data has to be closely monitored when it comes to sharing, because it can probably harm interest of a data principle in this case. And that's where the I keep mentioning that the personal data protection bills also comes into the picture. Again, it is not a regulation yet, it is still a draft, but this report tells and recommend that that has to also be considered when you're talking about sharing private data. In that case, the recommendation is it has to be raw, factual, anonymized community data. That is basically defined under the ground rules. Okay, so that way we will be making sure that the regulatory compliance need are now followed when it comes to mechanism. Now, what is the actual process of really sharing? So the metadata that is being stored would basically give anybody, if at all it is accessible. That's what the report proposes. Then what would happen is that while searching the data, I would know that okay, this is the data available, looking at the metadata, and I would probably know that this is what I can do with this data. Then once I am sure that I have the data, because I looked at the metadata and I think that there is a data, then I can initiate the request with the specific data business to provide much more detail on that. And then that whole thing really processes further and goes to the data custodian. And if the data custodian can probably look at the ground rules and then recommendation and all of those, and then it can basically grant and fulfill the request, and hence the whole process would end there. But what if the custodian cannot fulfill it, and then it goes to the a non-personal data authority, and then what they can do is that they can further evaluate, and based upon what value it is bringing, whether it is really going to add value, bring value to the current process, whether it is going to help, and after all those due diligence, it can still ask the data custodian to fulfill the request, and and provide the data back to the requester. In this case, it could be a organization, it could be a startup, looking at and or wanting to create some kind of a services. There are two more things into this, that data trustee in this case can further also look at this request, and if they see that it is really valuable, what they can do is that they can further make it available for general good or domestic startup activity, or general availability of this particular data, because ultimately one request that came, and then it underwent certain evaluation process, and if you feel, or if the data custodian and PDA feels that it is going to be a valuable one, then why not make it generally available? So that's where data trustee comes into the picture, and they can probably take that call as well. And then finally, data custodian also can look at that data and think that, okay, this data is really going to provide value. Then they can, looking at the value proposition, they can create this as a service and then market it as well. So this is obviously very early in this case to look at the mechanism, but I see still there is a process in place. Again, I'm not saying it could be the best and best of the process, but there is a clear-cut path that there has to be a there should be a requester, there has to be a request process, and when the request process comes in, there is authority who would basically go ahead and look, evaluate, and then fulfill the request. They have all the rights to say no to that request, and then the requester can further talk to or make it into the notice of NPDA, non-personal data authority, and they can further evaluate upon that data custodian rejection, and then they can probably look at it and then find that no, there is a value, and they can again say that, okay, no, go ahead and give it or fulfill the request. And then there is also a role of data trustee to make it much more generally available, because it was indeed valuable data, and there is going to be a lot of value for others who might need this in future. So that way, I think replenishing that whole process, and there is a good feedback mechanism also. There is a good evaluation and workflow out there. There is some decision making also happening over there. That makes me feel that it's a good first attempt to the process. But again, it can further go and probably evolve in future. So with that, moving on to the next one is talking about, while those mechanism, request response, fulfillment of the data sharing request is being done, what are the different checks and balances, which is very important in this process, so that we are not only talking about creating a metadata pool. People should be coming and able to search it, and then they think that it is important, then now request the data, and then data is being shared. But during this entire process, what are the different governance and control mechanism in place also need to be looked at, and that's where these checks and balances at the end of this chapter was also mentioned. I just took a quick stab on that. So it is basically also talking about few 6 things like location, guidelines, and that's where if you have already read personal data protection bill, you would know that what kind of data can be stored, where it can be taken. I mean, the country specific things, that what all I can take out of the country and all of those. So based upon the sensitivity of data, location consideration has to be followed. So for that, PDP PB 2019 has to be referred. Then there is something called data businesses would basically process the data. So they will have their different technology, cloud provider, and all of those. What kind of a contract has to be in place so that the data processor, in this case, the provider here, right? So if you have gone and through the PDPB report, it is basically the third party who is processing the data. In this case, data businesses will have the provider, like cloud provider. How they are also abiding by the regulation led by the report also should be contracted well, and then evaluated and I would say monitored on regular interval. Then tool. So it basically would ensure that all this store and everything is under the it is IT secure and then following the compliance guideline. So for that there has to be a regular scanning or monitoring and reporting. It has to be, ideally it has to be proactively done on a certain interval, just to, there is no definition out there, but yes. And then it talks about involvement of expert from industry, and advisory, who can look at the process holistically and then think that, okay, what kind of a different risk mitigations, suggestion for the improvement and all. And then finally the report also talk about the, how the organization who is really abiding by the entire rules are supported, encouraged, and who are following the process. So that's all about the data sharing in mentioned in the Personal Data Protection Bill, which is in a draft mode. Again, it is not a rule that has already been enacted. It is a draft regulation which is being discussed a lot and published, for us to be able to look at it, and you can feel free to read it, give your suggestion, because remember that is where you have opportunity to contribute, because this is going to come and become a rule, and we are the one who is going to follow that. So I feel that it is a great idea to contribute when it is really in discussion, when it is really in draft mode, so that you can put your opinion over there and make that count and help this report come out the way you want, and really win-win for all the parties involved in this case, in the data ecosystem. So with that, this is the end of this chapter and then show. I am going to talk about the next episode. It's all about going to be a data regulatory authority. It is something that is going to be in the center, which basically helps regulate all the different various roles involved. And when it comes to the roles, I let me remind you that it is data principal, data custodian, data trustee, and trust. So all of those basically kind of should work together, and who would ensure that, or who would basically be a central point for all those coordination? It's basically going to be data regulatory authority in this case. So in the next episode, I'm going to discuss about that. Until then, I would like you to listen to this and share your questions and thoughts, and more than that, go and share that also on the website, where the committee and the Government of India is asking for people to give their input and feedback related to this important regulation, important report, non-personal data governance, so that they can make it better, so that they can amend it as based upon the feedback that you are going to give. With that, I will sign off, and thank you very much everyone for watching this. Let me know your thoughts and questions. Thank you very much. Bye bye.